So let's just review the basic Nusach for Kabbalat Shabbat, and then we'll start on the basic Nusach for Maariv. So basic Nusach would be something like, let's look at page 12. Oh,
Hi.
Michael, you're back.
Yes.
Wow, Michael's back. Michael White is back from Hawaii.
Where did they do that?
You look the same color as a Kona bean.
Oh.
Wow, look at that. Hey, step in front of the camera so
Hi.
Judy can see how,
Just
come over here so you can be seen.
Hi.
Look at this.
Or Allah Shalom.
Hello, yeah. So look how dark he is. Yeah, beautiful. Well, welcome back from Hawaii. Yeah.
So is there a Nusach Hawaii?
Yes, well, you know what they call, this, the Hawaiians there is a specific Hawaiian religion.
Yes.
Right? And do you know what this is, I'm not making this up. The person who is the highest, official functionary of the Hawaiian, religion is called what? You know what it's called?
No idea.
The Big Kahuna.
Oh, the big kahuna.
And that's where we get that expression, the Big Kahuna. Right, which means that he's a Kohen, Kohen HaGadol, right? The Big Kahuna, right?
Nice try, Dan.
I actually want to show you one. No, I want to show you a sign. And look, do you want me to put it up? So
Well, get it close. The camera's on top.
I can't see it. Wait a sec.
Oh.
Yes, sort of. House of God. The church, though.
Yeah, read all the way down on the bottom, the very last thing in the no
I can't see
column.
what it says.
That's blurred.
Okay, I'll show it to
What is
So
Dan.
just read it to me.
Okay, it says, oh, okay. It's called the Helen Okana, House of God, Sacred Grounds and Pond of the Kel, I can't read the name, it's like 15 syllables long
Yeah.
church. It says the following, on these grounds, no trespassing, no drinking of alcoholic beverages, no smoking, no use of illegal drugs, no use of foul language, no use of pork products.
Interesting, especially considering that Hawaii has so much pork.
Yes.
This is like Columbus thinking that he was in India. The Jews got the Hawaiian Islands and they said the Big Kahuna is here.
That was in,
That's cool.
like in the Big Island, in the, like, Kalua Kona, like when people talk about the Kona Coast, it's like the major city around there was where that, that's where I saw that sign.
Well, that's cool. Okay, so we're just doing a quick review of the basic Nusach for Kabbalat Shabbat.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna get a
wanna
book,
go
just the red.
grab a Siddur, Michael?
It's just the red. good
Just
enough
the
today.
red one, Siddur Shalom, Lev Shalem for Shabbat festivals. So we just look at page 12, for example, the bottom of the page. We have that kind of like that melody in several parts for the conclusion of each of the Psalms. Arba'im shana kut bedor va'omar am to'e levavhem vehem lo yadu derachai asher nishpati v'api im yivon el menuchati. So that's the basic. That's the basic conclusion. And if we just turn back to page 11, we can hear the basic beginning of it. Or as I mentioned last time, it's an expanded opening. Instead of just doing like part 1 and part 3, you have Lechu Neranana Ladonai Naria Litzoyishenu Mikadma Fana Betoda Izmirot Narialo. So you have a little bit broader beginning of it if you want, or just do the first 2 lines. Again, a lot of this is a lot of times it has to do with the Shaliach Siddur, how much, and the congregation in the room as to how much you want to add or not add to, like, expanding or not expanding some of the brachot, right? And then we talked about last time some of the melodies, like Shiru Ladonai Shir Chadash, right? So that's a composed melody based on the Nusach. But you don't have to do that. And again, there's many melodies that you can use. Shiru Ladonai Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai Kol Haaretz, right? That's another melody you can use for the same psalm. This psalm, this psalm, of course, is going to have lots of melodies because it begins with the words Shiru 4 times. Sing, 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 sing. Shiru, 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 Basaru, also from the root of the word shir. So we have that kind of idea of this song needing melody. Okay, so that's your basic nusach, for Kabbalat Shabbat. And if you just master that, then you can daven a Kabbalat Shabbat service. Okay, Michael, go ahead, do the whole thing. I know you weren't here.
Yeah,
Just kidding.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so let's look. Now we're going to look at the evening service, Arvit. So let's turn to page 39. And this is one of my couple of favorite things, interesting things to talk about here, because there is basic nusach, but there's also some anomalies to the basic nusach. And so, for example, how many of you have heard this for the opening of Kabbalat Shabbat? Baruch Hu for tomorrow, sorry. It begins with Baruch Hu, really beginning the service of Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. It sounds familiar, right? All right, now, how about this? Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Right, so yes, so we're going from a minor, that's not a harmonic minor, it's a regular minor, I think. From the minor to major. Okay, now, how many of you have actually heard the Kabbalat Shabbat, the Marv in major?
Probably heard it somewhere.
In major. Right. For Friday night. So we generally hear it in the minor, right? But the interesting thing is that the first Jews that came to this country, the Sephardic Jews, they came. The first Jews came to the country were Sephardic Jews. Right? So the tradition in the Sephardic tradition is to do Kabbalah, is to do Arvit on Friday night in major. So they don't do minor, they do major. And so what happened is that for a long period, so for the early part of the history of Jews in this country, any Friday night service was in major. And then we had the two substantial influxes of Ashkenazi Jews, one at the really just before the turn of the 20th century, the late 1800s. And then you had, those are the German Jews, right? Those are the German Jews. And then in the 20s, then you had the 20s and 30s, and you had that major influx of Ashkenazi Jews who were not the German Jews, but the Rushishes and the Litvaks, right? Each one of them with their own very different traditions, but most of the Germans and the Eastern Europeans mostly did the minor. So, and because they came in such large numbers that eventually you didn't hear the major being done on Friday night anymore. Unless you're my age and you went to show and you heard on Friday night the most interesting davening where you would have Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Congregation responds, Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed. Right? And it came to going back to so you'd have literally a back and forth, major, minor, major, minor, major, major, minor. right? So, nowadays, you're going to hear pretty much exclusively that melody in the minor, but there was, for a very long time, it was only major. And then for an interesting transitional period, it was done in both, which, to someone like, it must have been like really jarring to people's ears to hear that. So I always thought that was the way it's supposed to be until I got a good explanation of why, it was one of these, like, it was a horse, it was a mule kind of situations. This is right, no, this is right, no, this is right, no, this is right. Anyway, so there's the Nusach for Maariv on Friday night. Now this is one other thing that's really interesting, which is the following. When you get to the bottom of page 39, when you get to the last two lines, El Chai V'Kayam Tamid Yimloch Aleinu Li'olam Va'ed, that line, the penultimate line on that page, is the only time you hear the melody that's done. It's the only time you hear it ever as part of our davening. And historians, musicologists, experts in Nusach have absolutely no idea where it came from and what it is. And they literally, okay, I'm going to do it for you, and then I'm going to tell you what they called it. So we're starting 5 lines to the bottom of 39. You're in this minor Nusach. Adonai tzevot shemo El Chai V'Kayam. You hear that change? El Chai V'Kayam Tamid Yimloch Aleinu Li'olam Va'ed. And then you have Baruch Atah Adonai Hamari V'Aravim. So you have the El Chai V'Kayam Tamid Yimloch Aleinu. That whole thing is a little melody, which is different from everything else. And they literally did not know where it came from, historically, geographically. So they, at some point, they asked one of these, an expert, I think it was Max Wolber, what should we call this? And he said, we don't know what to call it. We're going to call it George. George. So when you hear someone davening referring to George, this is what they're referring to. Hey, did you hear the George today?
Oh, I'm gonna sing George today.
Yes, exactly right. You did the George right. Literally, that's what it's called. That's what it's called. It's like one of the most bizarre things you'll ever find.
That never happens anywhere else.
That's the El Chai V'Kayam. No, yeah, it doesn't. That's the only place it occurs in Nusach.
Probably someone made a mistake once upon a time. They got put in.
It's possible that somebody made a mistake, but that just got codified. That's one theory. That someone said it might have been like part of a popular melody in some town in Eastern Europe. Maybe part of a folk dance, a folk melody that got inserted there, and it should have been like much more of the prayer, but that's the only part that people remembered. From year to year. So I don't know. So there's really no explanation for where that comes from, but that's what's called George. Okay.
Dan, let me ask you something. Is there ever a time when the whole bracha, the whole thing from beginning to end is chanted, or it's only the first couple of lines and then the last 5?
Okay. Well, the answer is yes. In Sephardic tradition, actually every word is chanted out loud.
Oh.
For every service, which is why people used to complain about the Jews as like a cacophonous noise. Literally, that was a cacophonous noise because everybody would chant everything out loud, and of course you'd have some people on key, some people not on key, and some people just like saying the words and just mumbling the words without a melody at all. And that's the tradition in the Sephardic tradition, to say every word out loud. And in fact, when I know that we at Temple Emmanuel, you hear davening and silence. And I think I said this last week. When I went to shul as a kid, there was never, ever a second during any service where there was silence, ever, except when the rabbi gave a sermon. Right. Aside from that, there was never, ever silence. People davened out loud all the time. Even though, the so-called silent Amida, it's not supposed to be silent. You're supposed to say the words, and it's supposed to be audible. So there's no such thing as, silent Amida. So when there's silence in a Jewish service, to me, it's like embarrassing and not embarrassing. Sorry, it's jarring. It's like, why aren't people davening? I think because people don't know the Nusach, they don't know the words, they don't know the prayers. More and more people know less and less. And I think that could be part of it, but there's still plenty of conservative synagogues you can go to where people just daven, and that's what you hear the whole time. When you come to morning minyan, for instance, like Wes is a yeshiva bacher, right? You know that, right? He went to yeshiva for part of his high school education. So he davens out loud. Like he shuckles and he goes, well, you can hear almost every word. So it was a lot, and that's what I was used to growing up, but having like 30 or 40 people, saying that out loud, or in Shabbat morning, like 100 or 200 people, davening the prayers out loud.
Well, Alan Lehman, like I think said.
Alan,
every- like on
Alan
Sunday
Lehman,
morning,
yes,
he
Rabbi
goes-
Alan Lehman, who sometimes
And did
davens
Carl
with-
Fruit-
Hmm?
Did Carl Fruit?
I don't think Carl said every word out. He might have davened.
Or he would just people would mention that, like it maybe took like Elise may have said things like he would say, make sure you say every word.
Right, he did say that too, because people daven too fast. There's no question about it. Elias davens way too fast. No question about it.
I would imagine though, like if you went to Young Israel. like
Yeah, if you go to
Brookline,
one of
then
if you go to
probably-
Faith,
I mean, when
if you
I've
walk
been
up the
there,
street, if you walk up the street, like, I don't know, like 1,000 feet, and you get to the Chabad and you go in there, then you go up to Bethel and you go in there, then you go across the street to Beit Sassoon and go, and then you go to take a right and go to Shari Tefillah, all those shuls, you're never gonna hear silence in Dublin. Never gonna hear silence in Dublin. It's always, someone's always gonna be saying something out loud. So I hope that answers your question. So it's mostly.
Yes,
Yeah.
and no, but I know that there are shows where people daven out loud, but what I meant is there a formal melody for the in-between lines? You start out, you say Baruch atah Adonai and so on, and then
Not necessarily.
so starting with say B'chachma Poteach Sha'arim down to Golel Or.
Right.
There's no formal.
There's no formal melody. Some people chant it in what's called the Larynsteiger. Some people just chant, I'll tell you what that is in a second. And some people try to chant to the Nusach, and some people will just say the words. It's like,
Okay, thank you.
oh yeah, so I said the word Larynsteiger. You know what that is?
Like you're.
To
It's not
You know,
an
if you
official
know any
thing.
German? Or
just to learn.
yeah, Laren, right? And Steiger is a melody.
Oh,
Yeah. So Larynsteiger is what I grew up with for the Haggadah on Pesach, and it's also used as a memorization melody for studying Mishnah and Gemara.
mhm.
So do you remember? I don't know if you guys remember this also when you went to as kids to school and you learned how to say the 4 questions, right? Ma nishtana halala hazeh mikol. I say I would mikol halelois. Ma nishtana halala hazeh mikol halelos. You know that melody? No, no, you
Yeah,
know.
well, it is.
That melody is at least 1,000 years old. Because when you study Talmud and Gemara, you have a question, you get an answer, or you don't get an answer, you go on, you don't get an answer. And people will do this, like that, right? And that's called Bernstein. So people will even use that, even though it's not part of the Nusach, they'll use that for davening. I've heard that done, not that often, but sometimes. Yeah, so that's actually very, I can chant most of the Haggadah using that melody, because again, sitting around the table where I went with my family, the big family, 20, 30 people, everybody's trying to outdo each other with the Ivris, then we didn't speak Ivrit back then, we speak the Ivris, right? So I grew up, I still have trouble with sometimes with my Hebrew pronunciation because I grew up really hearing Ashkenazic pronunciation. And now, for the past, I don't know, 50 years, Hebrew's been spoken mostly in Sephardic pronunciation. So sometimes I'll still get my oys and my ahs a little bit mixed up. Kind of thing.
I got converted I started when I was 30, because I was Ashkenazic as well, so it was always.
Yeah,
And
until
then,
when?
then I started working at a Reformed congregation,
And they said, and they go, what's you talking about?
and I get to
It's
say, oh, yeah.
it's Shabbat, not Shabbos.
No, no,
Well,
they
see, I don't
couldn't
know,
do it anymore.
at least I think around. With my, like,
You have
because
to- you have to-
my
You
siblings
have to
grew
speak up,
up
you have to
with,
speak up so that Charlie can hear you.
my siblings who are all older than me grew up with alphabet as top side, the last two
Yeah,
letters. And
exactly.
I
Yeah,
grew up with top.
right.
And so I kind of figure like if you were starting Hebrew school somewhere between 1965 and 1968 was the transition year or
Yeah.
something.
It was somewhere in there. Yeah, that's about right. Because I was 10 and 65.
Uh,
Yeah, it was when I was in first grade of Hebrew school that they started to switch over to Sephardi pronunciation in teaching us.
Right. And then they would say, by the way, what's your Hebrew name? Yankel. You can't have that name. You can't have a Yiddish name. It's not allowed. You have to have a Hebrew name.
Yeah.
They used to do that to people. What's your name? Basha. You can't have Basha. It has to be Yafa.
Yeah, that's why my sister, like, I guess her name was Shayna Sybil, like Sherry White, but Sherry, but Shayna Sybil, she was nicknamed for.
Yeah.
But then they said in Hebrew school, it's Yaffa.
Right. So Shayna became Yafa. Right. So people that had Yiddish names, right, you weren't allowed to use them anymore.
And I guess.
I got my poor niece. Her name is Reshi Pesci. Literally Reshi Pesci. But it's a weird combination with. Anyway, so right, so just about how some of the traditions have changed, over the years. So again, just because we say this is the Nusach and this is the way it's done, doesn't mean that it was always done that way. It means that for a classically long period of time, it was done or is done that way, but there was a time that it wasn't done that way. Right. So anyway, so getting back to some of the basic melody of oh, do I have something to write with? Oh, markers. Okay.
That's not good.
That markers to write with. I just have to tell like language is always interesting to me. We're just talking about, we can probably, I don't know if you can see how the board or not, but we have like this letter, right? Can you see that, Judy?
Yes, a tough.
Right.
Yeah.
Or, to me, that's a
It's
suff. That's a suff, not a tough. That is a tough.
Right. Well, the interesting thing is from the way Ashkenazim pronounce Hebrew is that in fact, linguistically, it's the difference between voiced and unvoiced. The tough is voiced and the suff is unvoiced.
Right now, so the unvoiced, which makes if you were to use Ashkenazic pronunciation, you would say s, like an S sound. Now, but that's a vague approximation of what it used to sound like.
Exactly.
But it used to sound like this.
Right.
TH. So it wasn't, it was, you can't hear me on this, but like if I would have heard, like the word, it wouldn't be Shabbos and it wouldn't be Shabbat, it would be Shabbat.
Right.
Yeah, right. So that's kind of that. That's
like for a house or base that, the temples are, that Israel actually.
right. Right. So yeah, but you're actually exactly right about that. I'll get you some water, but I can't do it. Right, so then you have things like, if we can just continue on this sound for a second. Right, Judy, get some water. So we-
Sorry,
I forgot if you can see that or not.
no,
Is that too far away from you?
no, it's too faint. Because for me, from the
I know, I'm
the
gonna-
camera is not facing it straight on. If you write on the left of the board, I can see it.
Hold on a second. We have this letter. Can you see that now?
Shin, yeah.
Yes. Right now, and then of course, then we have the opposite. Where is
I know, the famous shibboleth, shibboleth.
so there was a time that there was no difference in pronunciation of that letter. It was always the SH sound. So it was very difficult to tell, like people of Hungarian descent will oftentimes, yes, I've heard this enough, but like will oftentimes pronounce these opposite. They'll say Yisrael instead of Yisrael. And they'll say Shema instead of Shema. Right? Because there was no consistency for a long time. I'm talking like biblical times, like going into the early beginnings of modern Hebrew way. Now, but then again, you have, and I can't really draw this too well, but you have this letter, right? All right, so does it make any sense for a language to have three completely different symbols that would make this, that would have the same sound? The answer is no. Why would that happen? Right? Huh? You think?
Yeah, just have to.
Right, so the answer is, why would that happen? Right, and the answer is because it never happened. These three things have different letters, different sounds. This is a TH sound. This could be a sh sound for the most part. This was like this, like ps, P and S together.
So if you were going to work like some psychology, like I'm
So
thinking
this
that
is, yeah, I'm
psychology
gonna give you
would
an
use a
I'm going to
song.
give you a word. I'm going to put a word on the board, and we'll pronounce it the way we pronounce it now, and then we'll pronounce it close to what it would have sounded like, in more ancient times. So let's see. Of course, this is actually an invention also. This is an invention of modern Hebrew. This didn't exist in biblical Hebrew.
You're saying
So what word is
so
that?
all of the vowels, right?
Yeah,
Or
most of
or
them, yeah.
just the
No, yeah, most of
diagonal,
them.
right?
But well, the vowels though, the O and the U was actually. Can you see that?
Yes,
So-
Sukkot.
Sukkot, right?
Sukkot.
Okay. Now we would say Sukkot,
Or
but going back to the older pronunciations, this would be a PS sound. And this would be a TH sound. So this would be pronounced Psukoth. Psukoth. Right, not Sukkot, right? Right, so, anyway, right? It's just like fun to look at. No, how language has changed. I mean, even in that, our modern English, it's like, it's not anything like when any of us grew up, because they speak in English. The words are just so different. There's your basic melody. And then you have the bottom, the 39, we're back to, we just had a little excursion into some Hebrew as it might have been pronounced in an earlier time.
Yes, I was hearing that.
So we have Umavir Yom Umevi Laila, Umavir Ben Umevi Laila, we could do Umavir Ben Umevi Laila, Umavir Ben Laila, Adonai Tzirot Shemo, and George El Chai Vekayam. Tamim Yimlach Aleinu Li'olam V'ed, Baruch Atah Adonai, Amariv Aravim, or Amariv Aravim. You have these like little excursions up and down with the melody. And then and the next, we go to page 40. So there's many different melodies that are that you could use for Ahavat Olam. Most of us know Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael, right? There are other melodies, some older, some more modern. It's traditional. It has been mostly traditional to sing Ahavat Olam with a melody, but it doesn't have to be. You could do. As a matter of fact, most of the melodies will end with going back into the Nusach. On page 40 at the bottom, with a little caret arrow is Baruch Atah Adonai, Ohei V'amo Yisrael. Now there's traditional to go into the major.
Right there, but you started in the major as well. So you
Oh, I did, right?
did that major.
Yeah.
Now that was, is that, I've heard that too.
Yeah.
Is that normal, or would you just do the whole thing in minor until you get to a low? That's what I.
Probably mostly in minor. Now, the tradition here of going into the major here is so that we can sing the melody, the popular melody for Shema in the major. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Right. So it's traditional, to do that. We can also just do that, saying the Nusach.
Yeah, I've heard it done kind of like in the minor.
No, that's only for high holidays.
So that's kind of what I thought, but I've heard it's.
That's actually only for high holidays.
So, right,
Yeah,
but I've heard it sung in the minor or chanted in the minor as well.
on Friday night, yeah, it's possible to do that. I think so, yeah. Now, and then there's also tradition to chant the Via Havtah in basic Torah cantillation. Via Havtah Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol miyadecha. Right, so doing that out loud. And I'm sure you probably know how to do that, right? Everybody does it wrong, but that's okay.
What do they do
Well,
wrong?
I'll tell you what they do wrong. B'chol levavcha, u'b'chol nafshecha, u'b'chol miyadecha is 100% wrong. It's 100% wrong.
So what should it be?
It should be b'chol levavcha, u'b'chol nafshecha. Those words are joined together. So if you haven't learned trope.
I've never seen that first way. I mean, I've never seen anyone do it that way.
B'chol levavcha, all the kids in Hebrew school learn that.
Oh, the kids, okay.
But everybody does.
No, but I think, no, because I mean, because if you get this as a Torah portion, then you have to sort of struggle, because the way we always
Sing it is
it.
wrong. So these are trope songs. These are
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So this trope sign here is called the tipcha. There are levels of disjunctive trope signs, and the highest level of disjunctive is level 1, which is medet nachta, which is the like a resting one, and the self pasuk, the end of the sentence. Tipcha is a number 2 level disjunctive. In other words, this appears virtually in every sentence as a pre-ending, and this is an accent. And when you have a mercha, this is called a mercha. A mercha is a conjunctive. You have to join the words between the mercha and the tipacha together. So if you look at this, the sentence we just did, you see b'chol levavcha, there's a mercha. And then you see b'chol nafshecha, that's where the tipacha is. So b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha is one phrase that's not, that's connected. You can't disconnect the words. Right. The other thing is the Timbuk accents. Oh yeah, look at the third line. If you look at the third line of this text, partway through you have Vishinan Tam Levanecha, and what's the next word?
Vidibarta.
Vidibarta. Wrong, Michael.
It's not
200 points
Vidi-
off.
Vidibarta.
Vidibarta.
Oh,
It's not
Vidibarta.
Vidibarta because Vidibarta is the past tense.
Oh.
You get it like when the children said this. No, it's not said. It says they will speak, they will say. In fact, it's a conversive verb, and it's a it's a future causative command form. You will speak of it. You will speak of it. If you say Vidibarta, you're saying past tense.
Oh.
And the trope signs tell you that.
accent.
So when everybody says they're talking nonsense because they're saying something that's happened in the past tense where it should be something that's a command form future causative tense. You will do this. This is something you shall do.
You're saying changing the accent
Changing the accent
changes
the tense and form of the verb.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Trope 101.
No, I'm not talking about trope, that's language.
No. This is trope 101. The trope tells you that.
I
It's
can
a
see what
language
it
one.
tells you, yes, but
Yeah, but the trope tells you that, so you have no chance to get it wrong.
right, I get that. I'm just saying the fact that there's two different tenses in one word with the same exact spelling,
Yes,
depending on where you put the accent,
yes,
is surprising to
Exactly.
me. I didn't know that.
exactly, right.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's right. So, anyway, so that's why I said most people sing this wrong because they're putting accents in the wrong syllables, and then it makes no sense. And if you know Hebrew, your ears are like burning like this. No, this hurts. It hurts. It hurts to hear this. Anyway, so, but the tradition is to sing this. And again, why do we sing this? It's because it's a moment where the congregation can sing. It's always good to have an invocation of the congregation to sing along with the leader, right? It's a good thing. You shouldn't have to. My feeling is that there should be a mix between congregation melody and prayer leader and Nusach. Anyway, so that's the tradition there. But when you get to the end of the Shema, you get to Adonai Elohechem at the bottom of page 42. You should go back into the Nusach. Adonai Elohechem emes. Right, and then when we get to where are we now? 42. Yeah, we have 40. Oh, we just did 42.
Yes.
So 43, you have 43A, 43B. We usually do 43A. There's no real melody on this page, although I have seen people set some of this text to melody, but traditionally I haven't heard it done much. But if you look, and then 43B is the same thing. There's really no congregation melodies there. But then you get to page 44. And then you have the Michamocha, right? The Malchut Tov Ratzon Kibul Aleichem. And again, Nusach or melody or both. Malchut Tov Ratzon Kibul Aleichem. Moshe Miriam, which is hard for me to do. V'nei Israel Atanu Shira B'Simcha Rabba V'Amru Chulav the minor. And then we go into Michamocha as a congregation melody, but you don't have to do that. You can do me. You can do that, but most people like to sing a melody here. When you get to V'ne'emar, you have the Chazan, the leader goes V'ne'emar Kifad Adonai Yaakov Galo B'yad Chazak Mimenu Baruch atah Adonai, Yal Yisrael. And then Hashkivenu, you can just melodies, all kinds of melodies for Hashkivenu. But sticking with the Nusach, and then when you get to Ushmor Tzeitzenu Uvoenu, again, if you're just staying in the Nusach, it's actually what I find interesting about this Siddur, is that they have the prayer leader starting at Ushmor Tzeitzenu Uvoenu. Because this is the only Siddur and the only davening that I've ever seen where the prayer leader starts there. It's usually the prayer leader usually starts 2 lines down with Ufros Aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha. Ufros Aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha, Baruch atah Adonai, Aporei Sukkot Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kol Amo Yisrael, Ve'al Yerushalayim. And then you hit the Shamru with with numerous melodies.
What did you, I think I missed you. What did you say about melodies are not for Ashkenazim at the top?
There's all kinds of melodies,
Yeah.
for that. You can dub it in the Nusach, or you can do whatever, whatever the many myriad of melodies are that are for Ashkenazim.
Yeah. I know the one that I first heard you introduce. I really
Well, there's like Ashkenazim. That's right. That's a very new melody.
I know.
These are all now Tehillah. Okay, so this is group of modern prayer leaders that they call themselves Nava Tehillah, which means what is Nava means beautiful or gorgeous, right? It's really Nava Tehillah. It means to beautify and the sanctification of God. So they have all these new melodies. Most of them are based in the Nusach, some of them are not. It's a little bit new wave-ish. Kind of really goes back even as far as like Joey Weisenberg. Even like people like composers like Craig Talbot, Julie Silver, written all kinds of beautiful melodies for these prayers. Okay. Anyway, so then you have Bishamru, which I mentioned is Bishamru B'nai Yisrael, or Bishamru B'nai Yisrael. And again, it's like I'm not going to stick to one melody. Like maybe for the class at one point I can record like this is a melody so they can learn at least one melody. If you're going to lead, because otherwise, there's so many of them. That it's like Lecha Dodi. If I were to record melodies for Lecha Dodi, it would be like a 5-set CD. Different melodies for Lecha Dodi. With, by the way, different versions of the text, right? Because Lecha Dodi, there are a couple different versions of the poem. Which we have one that has been chosen as the standard, but is not. And interesting, to think about even some of the other stuff, you go back a little bit. If you want to go back to no, it's not that. Must be the title.
It starts on 23.
Yeah,
At
20
least I thought
The Chadri is
this
on page
version
20
starts
something,
on
right?
23.
Right. Now, there's one of the prayers where I forget which one it is, but that there are 2 versions of it, which in one, each of the adjectives is masculine, and the other version of it, each of the adjectives is feminine. I can't think. This drives me crazy. I forget which one it is. Anyway, but I'll think of it and I'll let you know. So moving ahead. Oh, so this is the next thing that we come to before the Amidah is the Chatzi Kaddish on page 30 something.
The Shamru is always done with a melody or?
Yeah, I've only heard the Shamrus in the melody. That's not true. There are some people, actually, there's a very few number of people that will actually chant the Vishamru because it's direct Torah text. I've heard some people actually chant it according to the Torah. Right. That's not common, but it could be done, and it might be kind of fun to do that this Shabbat before everybody waiting on.
Uh-oh,
Yeah.
make trouble.
Now, the Chatzi Kaddish, or Chatzi Kaddish is the proper pronunciation. So again, so for some odd reason, the Kaddish has become like one of the most interesting parts of our prayer. And there are something like 17 different ways to chant a Kaddish. And each one of those ways will, if someone is knowledgeable about Jewish, tradition, they will know exactly where you are. In other words, if I go, Yitkadash v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Right, now what is that from? It's one of the high holidays.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's done on Erev Slichot, and it's also done on pre-Musaf. On Rosh Hashanah in Yom Kippur. So, but if I do it, but like the right. So that Kaddish, that melody is used a lot of times. That can be used a lot of times. That can be actually used on the high holidays and as well. The Chatzi Kaddish here is unique in that it's only done 2 times in the liturgy, the melody. Now I lost it. Do another one. Now I'm gonna have to. Now since I've seen other melodies, I've like it's gone out of my head. Oh, here it goes. Yitkada v'yitkada shemei Rabbah. Right. Okay. So that's done on Friday night at this point. That's the correct Nusach for this concept. When is he? This is for 200 points and a free bagel and tuna at outside Kiddush.
Right.
What's the other time you hear this?
Not during these Torah service.
Right, Torah service and Shabbat. Torah service and Shabbat.
Okay, where's my bagel?
Okay. Well, I said you have to come back. You have to come back to Shabbos to get it free.
But no tuna fish.
There's nothing free in this world. Okay. So that's the only time. That's the only. If people do that melody at other times, it's actually incorrect. It's actually incorrect. So this melody is used only those 2 times in the liturgy.
That's funny.
Yeah.
You want to know why it's funny to me? When I started at Beth Shalom in Needham, this was the only Chatzi Kaddish they knew. Every time
Right, that's
it
correct.
came, we did that. And I didn't know any better at that time.
Yeah. So again, so this is the only two times that this particular melody for Chatzi Kaddish is used. There's a Chatzi Kaddish and Torah service on the festivals on Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot is different. It's for the Torah service. Anyway, so yeah, so that's now here's the other thing. So when I said before, so this Amidah is Davka really kind of a silent Amidah, although when you daven it, you should say the words. You should actually hear the words being said. But this Amidah is there's never a point on an evening service. There's never a point on an evening service where you daven the evening service at any juncture out loud. The Amidah, never daven out loud. So like begin it together. There's no repetition of it. It's kind of something. Okay. Anyone know why that is? Why is it that we have an Amidah that we don't actually say any of it out loud?
Because it wasn't originally part of the marketplace thing, and they figured it was too much or something like that.
Well, you kind of on the right track, Hal. So the idea is that it's actually unclear whether an evening service is actually something we actually need to do. We actually something that we need to do. We know we need to do a shacharit service. And we know we need to do an afternoon service. Because those two things relate specifically to times of sacrifice. So what is you know what shachar means?
Morning.
Morning, right? So shacharit means morning, right? So there was always a morning sacrifice, an early morning sacrifice in the Beit HaMikdash. What does the word mincha mean? Mincha does not mean afternoon, it means the afternoon sacrifice. Yeah, people get confused about that. Afternoon is tzoharayim, but tzoharayim, but tzoharayim, but tzoharayim, depending on which Hebrew linguist you're listening to, whether it's Josh Jacobson or Yishai Serid or Sigalit Davis, who will fight with you every minute of the day about how to pronounce that word. It's so much fun to listen to them. Anyway, so that's the afternoon. So mincha is actually the name of the afternoon sacrifice, late afternoon sacrifice. But there was never an evening sacrifice. So there are two different ways in which the rabbis teach us. This is in the first Mishnah about prayer services. You know, it says Vayesh came Avraham baboker. Avraham got up early in the morning. Why? To do the minchas, to do the shacharit sacrifice. And Yitzchak was wandering in the field with Tzoharayim. He was in the afternoon. Why was he wandering in the fields? He was looking for a place to do his mincha sacrifice, right? But there's no sacrifice in the evening. You know, they made up something with Yaakov, that Yaakov would study into the night. The text supported that. It's very weak. So the rabbis gave us a kind of a compromise in the structure of the Siddur, where they added an Amida in, but you don't say it out loud because to them, it's sort of unclear whether it's actually something that we are doing or not doing. For the Amidah. So that's true of every evening service, Although you do have something really interesting, because the evening service here and Friday night is different from any other evening service. And tell me why I'm saying that.
It's shorter and also gets some of it gets repeated kind of in the summer. And that's on the evening, which never usually happens.
Right. Say that again, Hal?
Which part of it?
The whole thing.
All right, it's a shorter service,
Mhm.
because you don't do sort of petitions and stuff on Shabbat.
Right. There's only 7 brachot, three
Right,
there.
yeah.
Well, that's true of every Amidah on Shabbat. There's only 7 brachot as opposed to
Right,
the
yeah.
18 or 19.
On Shabbos.
Yeah.
And then, even though normally you never repeat or say out loud specifically Azan,
Yeah.
on any evening service here, you actually do a repetition,
Which is what?
which is, well, it's symbolic, but it's like Hulu.
Exactly right. Yeah. So what Hal's pointing out is that the what's called the middle bracha in the Amidah. So first of all, just to go back a little bit, every weekday Amidah has 19 brachot. That's a little bit of controversy too. There are 19 brachos. One of them got split in half at one point. Now it's not the one that people think. People think the bracha, the Lamal Shinim Al Tehi Tikva, was actually added into the Amidah, but that's actually one of the earliest brachos in the Amidah. It's the bracha, it's Semach David Avtecha, and then B'Yushalom Yircha Tashuv. That bracha used to be this is the weekday Amidah. That bracha used to be one blessing. It got divided into 2 at one point. So there were 19 brachot in the Amidah. Even though it's called the Shemona Esrei, because originally it was Shemona Esrei, it was originally 15. But on Shabbat and on festivals, there's actually, and on Rosh Hashanah, there's actually only 7 blessings in the Amidah. The first 3 and the last 3 are the same blessing that you say on any Amidah. 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever. The first 3, last 3, always the same brachos. It's what happens in the middle that becomes critical. And so what happens is on Shabbat, we eliminate all the brachot that we normally do on a weekday, which are what's called petitionary, which means that we're asking God for something. We don't ask God to do anything for us or to do anything on Shabbat. Why?
Because you rest on Shabbat.
Because God's resting on Shabbat too. Exactly right. exactly. So we don't petition God for anything in Shabbat. So, right, so the middle blessing in each of the Amidas, whether it's Friday night or Shacharit or Musaf or Shabbos Mincha, there were 4 Amidas, each one of them with a different theme of Shabbat. The first one is on Friday night, and that's the part that we actually do out loud. So that's why this is called Me'ein Sheva. It means it's kind of like the 7 brachot repetition, but it's not. It's only part of it. It's only the part that begins by Chulu Hashemayim v'haaretz, right? Which is the Torah text that we read when God is creation. So that bracha, that look back in the Amidah, that's the middle blessing in the Friday night service as well. So we're doing that out loud, and then we kind of begin the Amidah with the Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov. But then it goes, and then it stops, and then we go to Magen Avot. So we're kind of like beginning with the repetition, but not really. So that's what happens there. Yeah, so page 53, again, the 200 points, and not this way, this is gonna be an everything bagel with whitefish salad this time and lox, right? How do you pronounce the first word on page 53? Not where it says Me'ein Sheva, but the next word.
Is that one you talked about?
No,
Vayachulu.
Okay, thank you. Say it again, Helen.
Vayachulu.
Vayichulu Hashemayim va'aretz. It's not Vayichulu, it's Vayichulu Hashemayim va'aretz. Vayichulu. So therefore, the person leading the service should sing Vayichulu Hashemayim va'aretz. Right. Or whatever melody. Again, many melodies for this. And by the way, there are also different versions of the next part of it, where some people will do the Amidah, beginning of Amidah, sounding like it's a Shacharit service. Baruch atah Adonai, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avoteinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. Right. Some people will begin that section like that. I've never done it that way. I just find it confusing because you're not actually doing a Shacharit service, although it's perfectly acceptable according to Nusach. But I do something different. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov, and I put in the imahot Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanora Eloyon Chonei Shamayim v'Haaretz. That's what I do. Then you have Magen Avot Bidvaro B'Chemetim B'Mamaro, or Magen Avot Bidvaro.
I've never heard anyone chant it. I've always done it with that melody. Or
What,
some other
Magen Avot?
melody. I'm Magen Avot.
Magen Avot
I've never
Bidvaro
heard it chanted.
B'Mamaro.
Heard it without
Ha'el
chant.
HaGadol She'Kamalu V'Nitnimo B'Yom Shabbat V'Tro Ki V'Matzah V'Niach Lahem L'Fanav Navod B'Yirav V'Achad. It's a chant melody. You never heard that one? It's very traditional. But again, many melodies and composed melodies for this as well.
Yeah.
And then you have after this, you have the 54, the Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu, and you're back to the Nusach that you started with the repetition. You have Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu, Mitzvenu Milchateinu, Chadashim Tzortecha V'Techalkeinu B'Toratecha, etc. So that's one of the melodies. And then the Kaddish Shalem here is it's usually done in what's called, it's usually called the festive major. That's what we mentioned before. Yeah, so that's, you can do it in minor if you want, but most people will do it in the major.
I always get confused over which times you do it like that.
Yeah.
Festive major versus doing it in the minor. So I think we've done both ways. Like
Well, there are a lot of
weekdays.
it's one of the places where the Nusach is fluid. In other words, if I ask when I ask my Nusach teacher, which one, they'll say yes. You can do either here, either one's acceptable because either one can be used, either one can be used in the Nusach of the davening, so it's okay.
When you say the other one, you're talking about doing it in minor or
Yeah.
is it specific melody for that?
No, they're doing it in minor. All right, then we have Kiddush. I think you all have the Kiddush, but you can do that. Again,
Sing it for us.
Baruch
I'm
atah
just kidding.
Right. And then we have Aleinu, which should never be sung out loud.
Never really.
Right, you know that Aleinu should never be sung out loud. You know that, right, Judy?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Never done an Orthodox service. I'm
Right,
sure.
yeah. So Aleinu is one of the more fascinating prayers. It's kind of like, I would say it's kind of like a virus. In the sense that it started out with a specific purpose and then has spread itself everywhere where it doesn't belong. Okay, so Aleinu, where does Aleinu belong? In Rosh Hashanah, where in Rosh Hashanah? Not just any time in Rosh Hashanah. In the Musaf service of Rosh Hashanah, in the section of the Musaf service called Malchuyot, kingship, and that's when we do Aleinu l'shaneach, and then we go V'anachnu kodeim. That's about that, right? That's the purpose of Aleinu. It was never intended to be used at any other point in literature.
I've always wondered about that.
Yeah.
It seems weird that it's there and yet it's every place. It's like two different ways of using it
Yeah.
in a sense. And
I mean, you
thought
think
one
about it,
of
so in
them
other words,
has to be wrong.
Elaine has almost become trite in the sense that it has this magnificent message. Yes, it's Donald Love has become almost trite, even though it's, and Yigdal also, well, Yigdal a little less than Yigdal, but Donald Love, it's just, since it's so metric, you can sing like, Yankee Doodle to it, and people, they don't really get the complexity of the poetry and then the actual awe of God's presence. I mean, Maimonides was in awe of Adonai, and he wrote Yigdal, right? But he was in awe of Adonai because it's just such a deep message, right? Anyway, so then Aleinu, then it became used on Yom Kippur. I'm not sure exactly why or how, and then it got moved to the festivals and then Shabbat, and then it's a weekday, so that eventually it got placed everywhere. But again, it was really meant to be used only once a year, actually twice a year, 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, but only in that one service in the Musaf, in the Malchuyot part of the Musaf service on Rosh Hashanah.
Is that a possible explanation why it's never not supposed to ever be chanted out loud other than on?
Yeah, exactly. So in other words, but Aleinu l'shaneach lado, not all, which is a kind of composed melody. In most, as you said, in most traditional services, and some people that even daven with us at Temple Emmanuel, we get to this point, they go, Aleinu l'shaneach lado, and it's like mumble through it. And that's it, right? So again, this is one of these really interesting prayers that has, inserted itself where it didn't really belong. But and then of course, then the service technically ends with Kaddish. We talked about Kaddish last time. Remember we talked about Kaddish last time? The purpose of Kaddish. Do you remember, Judy, what we talked about last time?
Kaddish praising life.
I'm talking about the liturgical function of Kaddish.
Well, it's like a section break.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's a bookmark. It's a bookmark. It's a section break, as Michael just said. So there are major and minor breaks within the structure of the service, right? When you have a major break, or you're going to start something major and brand new, you have Kaddish Shalem. When you have something within a section of a service, you have a Chassid Kaddish.
Well, wait, a minute, morning Kaddish generally, at least,
Mornis Kaddish is,
Here ends the service.
Mornis Kaddish is basically the function, it's functioning as the Kaddish that closes the part of the service. It just so happened that there's a whole history, we can go into some point, there's a whole history of the development of why a Kaddish became one associated with mourners at various points in the service. But the function of any Kaddish is really to mark, and whether it's Mornis Kaddish, Kaddish Shalem, and by the way, Chatzi Kaddish, it's actually, Chatzi Kaddish is actually a misnomer also, because Chatzi means half. The technical term is a diminished Kaddish, because it's only missing one line, Tikabel Soton about Kol, right? So it's called the diminished Kaddish in the logos of Nusach nerds.
what do they call it in Hebrew?
It's called Kaddish Damam, which means poor, P-O-O-R.
I know there's one called Kaddish the Rabbanon, but that's.
So that's the Rabbanan, that's a Kaddish de Rabbanan, that's a Kaddish for in honor of scholars, and you usually
Right.
just say that every time you finish studying a section of Torah.
We say that whenever we're on page 13.
Yes, exactly, on page 13 in the weekdays. Yes,
Good.
exactly. Because you actually studied a little bit of Torah, one of those sections.
Oh, right, yeah.
Anyway, so that's the purpose of a Kaddish. So the purpose of a Kaddish is to mark either a major end or a minor end of a part of the service. Right? Okay, and then of course we like good doobies, we always end our services. Well, not the weekday morning and weekday night. We don't have a hymn of any kind. But on Shabbat, since we're extending the joy of Shabbat, we end with some kind of a hymn or poem or
It's
something.
in our, at least in
It's
our, or like weekday morning prayer book, they have a dono law. Like
They
we
have a
don't
dono.
do it, like.
But
we
if you
end
but
with
if you look
the
at an
second one.
Orthodox Siddur, if you look at an Orthodox Siddur, don't allow at the beginning. It's in the beginning of the service, because you're thinking about Adon Olam Hashem Malach, the Terem Kol Yitzir Nivra. What does that mean? What does it mean that God is the master of the universe? God created time, but without time does God exist? Yes, but how can we as humans understand that? Because we exist only within the structure of time. That's what Adon Olam is all about, right? So it's a very complex meditative moment. And they also, by the way, include the Serenity Road, the recitation of the Ten Commandments every day as part of the service also. Now, you would think that we would do that every day. Why shouldn't we do that every day? Recite the Ten Commandments. We do Shira Hayam, but we don't recite the Ten Commandments. But in Orthodox Siddur, all of that leads up to Birkot HaShachar. And speaking, I think I might have mentioned this too last time. We talked about Nusach a little bit for the Torah service, right? So we have all these beautiful melodies for the Torah service, but most of them are at least the 1700s, and later. Some of them, most of them later than that. And I think I wrote that. I should find out. Yeah, there it is now somewhere. And then the one that the last we're doing recently, beautiful set again. Oh, let's Mayor Finkelstein. Let's Mayor Finkelstein. But prior to that, what did the Torah service sound like? It was before these composed compositions. What did the Torah service sound like? It sounded the same all the time. So that's your hint. In other words, so the way we do it in a weekday morning service, that's the way it sounded all the time. Vayivin Saharon, Vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai, V'yafusu Avecha, V'yinusu Musanecha, Mipanecha, Ki Mitzion Tetzei Torah, V'adonai Yerushalayim, Baruch Shemetan Torah L'Yemo Yisrael, V'Kedushato, which sounds like Shabbos Mincha, right? Because that's supposed to be it, and it's based on what we call high holiday trope. Right? That's what weekday morning Shabbos Mincha sound like, and that's what all Torah services sounded like before Zulzer and Lewandowski and and Max Baer Abraham Bear and all these, great Kachko, all these great composers came along and started to write, write more magnificent, broader melodies, for the Torah. But it all sounded like that. And by the way, so when we read Torah all year long, except for the high holidays, the melody that we're using is actually a much newer melody, because what we call high holiday trope was actually the way the Torah was read all the time. There was no distinction between high holiday and other times of the year for several hundred years, 500, 600, 700 years. Right? So what we do now is actually something most I wouldn't call brand new, but it's a newer version, having to do with the diaspora and the effects of the musical traditions of the super cultures on what we do. I mean, a lot of things that we do are actually somewhat based on musical traditions from other cultures, And
So, like, when you
it
say-
got inserted into our prayer melodies.
No, because like, I think you, like in the Torah trope class, you said, I'm not sure if like what we do is Western Ukrainian.
Well, we
trope or
do
Eastern Ukrainian.
we do a Western Ashkenazi, right? That's what I do, right? As opposed to an Eastern Ashkenazi, which is what a lot of other people do. And then there's.
But you're saying that was
and then-
somewhat influenced by the secular.
Yeah,
like,
there was some
music,
sense in which some
secular
of that was
music.
influenced by the secular music around it. But some of the popular melodies that we have, Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, Masod et HaShabbat L'dorotav v'yidolam. I love that modal run there. Na 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 na. Tzor mi shalom. It's the same melody for Tzor mi shalom from the Birkat Hamazon. Baruch Adonai, this is a very popular tune. It was a secular tune. It was it was actually about a beautiful woman. La rosa e floesa, the beautiful blooming rose. La rosa e floesa. I forget the rest of the words. So some of these melodies, people say, "Oh, this is a traditional Jewish melody." If you're Sephardic and you grew up in Spain, and it's kind of like saying, it's like Tika Donna lumps like Fire and Rain, because everybody knows James Taylor. It's like a popular song that everybody knows, right? So I don't know lama sherma
That's great for tonight.
That's great for tonight, exactly right. So, take melodies that are popular and inserting them into the prayer. There's always been like some, I don't know, there's a tension there. There's a tension there
Like traditional
between like what is
adapting.
traditional and what become like, if you didn't know that that was a popular Spanish folk song, then you would just assume it's a Sephardic Jewish melody without having known that previously, right? Right. Anyway, so a lot of these melodies just get like put in here. Oh yeah, like Elise has been doing this tune for Oziv Zimrat Yah. Oziv Zimrat Yah. It's a popular, it's a melody that comes from what do they call
A pop song.
it's from the what are the mountains that are south of here? Like
Poconos.
Blue Ridge, the Blue Ridge.
Oh, Blue Ridge.
Yeah, the
Appalachians.
Appalachian. It's an Appalachian melody.
Oh,
My love, she is a rose. She is a rose, my love. That's what it's from.
Oh, that's the lyrics.
it's a Appalachian folk melody. And now people think, oh, it's a beautiful melody written for yeah. No, not really, but now it's inserted into the prayer. And then like in a few months, people think they've always sung that. You know, we've always done it that way. You know, because I'm going to end with this. One of my favorite jokes about someone comes to the Chazan, the cantor, and says, "Cantor, I love your singing. It gets better every year, better and better. I just love your singing. But you know what? Don't you know any other melodies?" And the cantor says, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about." He says, "Every time I hear you, it's so beautiful, but it's the same melody. And this is the melody that I hear every time I hear you. And it goes like this. Don't you know any other melodies? Because every time I hear it's that melody." He said, "Well, if you only got the shoulder one, that's the only melody."
That's good.
And with that, we're gonna, oh, look at this, we're going way late. Sorry about that. By the way, I will post to everybody on an email some sheet music of some of the melodies that we mentioned here. And eventually I'm gonna also do some recordings of this, the basic Nusach for each of the services, so that we can, be able to work on them even like line by line, sing this, so that at some point, Michael will come on a Friday night, we'll get up and we'll lead a Friday night service. Well, yeah, we'll kick Elias out of Shabbat alive. Michael will get up and,
Maybe opening act.
yeah,
not
maybe,
the
exactly,
opening
right,
act.
exactly right.
The train with a lot of stuff is, what's his face, the big rabbi, I can't remember his name, Karloff.
Oh, yeah.
Shlomo
Oh,
Karlbach.
Shlomo Karlbach. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
people sing songs all the time. It's a traditional anonymous folk melody.
Yeah.
No,
It's him.
no, Shlomo Karlbach wrote that. I mean, if Roman, I don't know, you can, matter of fact, there are shows, I think I mentioned too, also, there are shows in Israel that on Friday night are Karlbach minions. So you can just go on a Friday night and you can spend Kabbalat Shabbat, you spend it for like 2 hours getting ready for Shabbat with Kabbalat Shabbat going on for 2 hours, singing Karlbach melody after Karlbach melody, but over and over till you work yourself into like a frenzy of bringing, of Shabbat. Then of course, some people, our Talmud class last week was about, cancel culture. I mean, people want to cancel, Karlbach.
I gotta watch that.
Hmm?
I gotta watch
Yeah,
it.
because I didn't mention this, but why cancel Karlbach? Well, apparently he was misogynistic, very, I don't know, he was bad to women. So anyway, all right, folks, have an awesome night.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for
I'm
joining
staying
us here.
sharp, but I have a call to make.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right,
And
yeah,
see
Zosh-
Thank you, Dan.
Zosh is gonna lock
Bye.
up any.
Bye-bye.